Welcome back to the panel discussion, Transforming the Government Workplace Through Cloud, sponsored by RMPO Technologies and Dell EMC. On federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM, I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Scott Bean, the Assistant Director of the IT Infrastructure Division at the FBI, Vicki Hildebrand, the Chief Information Officer at the Transportation Department, Gene Edwards, the Executive Director of Federal Sales for Civilian Strategic Programs at Dell EMC, and Troy Massey, the Director of Enterprise Engagements for RMPO Technologies. At the end of the last segment, Scott, you brought up this idea of you'd love to get rid of desktops. You'd love to move to a world of thin clients, a virtual desktop interface, a way to kind of, hey, not worry so much about, is it patched, is it updated, how do I secure it better? But you guys haven't, and my question is why?
So a lot of it has to do with making sure that we have compliance and security handled. And so, at this point, it's fairly simple for us to manage our desktop environment, to manage our data center environment. As we do more and more in cloud and more in thin client, it's requiring us to consider more of what our authorizing official is going to need in order to grant that ATO to get us out there where we can operate with a new system or a new way of delivering a platform. And then with standards changing every day, sometimes those goalposts move. Just as we think we're about to get there, or just as we think we're about to move to ATO, we'll get a whole list of new POAMs that we've got to fix. So it's really understanding the playing field and preparing as much as we can, working closely with our ISOs and ISMs to make sure that we're anticipating what the AO is going to need to make those decisions and drive that. But in the last year to year and a half, it's been fairly challenging just to keep up with changes that we've had in standards.
Now, I don't want to get wrapped around the security axle too much, but will the continuous diagnostics and mitigation program, continuous monitoring, will that make this process easier? Because instead of worrying about the goalposts, as the goalposts move, so will the monitoring of the sensors, the
Absolutely. I think that is going to be a great way forward. It's just making sure that our ISOs, ISMs, and AOs recognize that and get on board with it, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to grant the ATO.
Correct.
I can't tell them, you got to get over it. You got to get past endpoints.
They have to be comfortable.
But we have to make sure that we get them comfortable with how we're going to make sure that we are safe and secure as we're making more capabilities available to our folks.
Now, Vicki, you're a little new to the government, so ISOs, ISMs, and what was the last one?
Do
you have all those acronyms down yet, or?
No, I don't. And every day I ask my team, what is that?
Exactly.
So I'm learning. I do an ATO though. I know what an ATO is. So,
not from the security side, because you're in a different environment than the FBI.
Yeah. I guess what I want to say is it's not all that different. We have different levels of classification as well, but I think it's really all about how we build software in the future. It really is changing, and if you have a development environment, an IDE, an integrated development environment, you're constantly monitoring, is your software quality and secure and performing? You're iterating. I think the government doesn't, it's new to a new way to develop software. So I had a team in last week who worked with one of our modes of transportation and gathered some requirements, and the prototype is going to be available tomorrow. A prototype in a week. And then they're going to move to production in 2 weeks. So it's just very different. And as we learn how to do software this way, we have to bring these ISMs and ISOs along with us, because it can't be back the old way of doing things.
And it plays into what Gene, you were saying earlier too, right? Around the DevOps culture, the change that you have to see.
That's huge for modernizing existing applications or creating new ones. But another component is that software is being scrutinized just like technology would be in DoD. Dell EMC's learned a lot from DoD on having to be STIG or DIACAP compliant, and now, as you mentioned, CDM, we're here to protect.gov, and with that, it requires a security supply chain risk management plan, and that means product assurance as well as supply chain management. So CDM for us is now going out and looking at our software and actually having it compliant to cybersecurity rules so that it works and it's functioning the way the .gov security requirements are meant to be.
Troy, let me bring you into the conversation. One of the things, as we've heard, is you have this push and pull, right? You have to be secure. You can't just jump in.
Right.
But at the same time, there's this need to change, to transform the workplace. Can you give me a sense of, or what conversations are you having with maybe clients who want to kind of find the balance?
Yeah, absolutely. So whether it's desktops or servers and going to the cloud, there's always the conversation about security. A lot of the cloud vendors have worked really, really hard to get certain levels of security classifications within their cloud networks. Today's cloud network will house SIPR, NIPR. They're moving towards TS.
Do you get a sense that the agencies are understanding that the security, like it's not the big bad wolf anymore? Don't be afraid of the cloud, because not just the security side, but because the security is balanced. And I'll tag back to the beginning where I was surprised that security is not the biggest challenge. It's resources, it's people, it's...
Yeah, you know, it's weird though. So I think some people are overconfident. So a lot of the reason we're moving to Windows 10, and it's a DoD mandate to move to Windows 10, is because of the huge security enhancements it's allowing. So we're going to VDI because it has a lot of security enhancements, easy patchwork. Cloud offers a lot of that same thing. But then they're taking it for granted and not tying in the security software layer as part of that implementation. So we're taking security for granted in some ways to a level we shouldn't be.
It's interesting to talk about DoD and Windows 10, and recently I did an interview with the TSA CIO, Russ Roberts, and he talked about there's a new DHS mandate to move to Windows 10 too.
Absolutely.
And I think that's, you talk to more agencies about that. Vicki, one of the things about the cloud that we've talked about, when we've talked about security, but really I want to tag back to the beginning, is really this workplace transformation, that this idea that all of these things are making it easier to meet mission. Talk a little bit about what DOT is seeing and what you're hoping to see over the next 6 or 9 months to ease that transformation.
What I really want to do, going back to what I was talking about earlier, is change the way we build software.
Right.
And if you use the tooling that the cloud gives you, you can do that in a very secure, performant way, a cost-effective way. And so I'm trying to move what is a mindset that every new application you need has to be a customized independent stack into this new approach. So that's what I'm seeing happening over the next year. And once we get there, I think we're gonna see some momentum going on here, and then we get to think about the transportation landscape and all those cool things that are happening in the world of automated vehicles and drones, and how can we tap into those and not just worry about some of the back office issues that we have.
Jean.
So to extend on what Vicki said, it's important not just for the employees at Department of Transportation, but for the citizen services. Having the success of remodeling those applications absolutely transform how an average citizen understands the service that Department of Transportation could provide to them. So it's really important.
One of the things that comes up many times is, well, the cost savings piece. There's a big push for IT modernization across government. I'm sure Vicki and Scott specifically are very familiar with the Technology Modernization Fund and the modernizing government, the ability to create working capital funds. But really the piece of this is the cloud doesn't necessarily always mean cost savings. It just means better efficiencies. I mean, Scott, is that the big play for the FBI in many ways? Is we can get more for the money we have today?
That's part of it, but we also want to look more globally at what cost savings means. If you're talking about just saving cost between what we're doing today in the data center between what we might do tomorrow in the cloud, or moving between different hardware, different infrastructure, however you want to look at it. That's one type of cost savings. What I'm looking at is overall cost savings for the mission of the FBI. So if I'm making my agents and analysts in the field offices more capable to do their work right where they are and to be more efficient in doing it, where they're not running back and forth to the field office, where they're not wasting time getting resources that I can deliver to them in the field, that's a cost savings as well. It's harder to calculate, but it's there. And we have to really consider that as we're making some of these hard decisions about where workloads should sit, how we're going to do our network connectivity to make sure we have the bandwidth to get to those applications in an effective way. They're hard decisions to make because sometimes it's hard to quantify what that cost savings might look like to offset the cost of what you're getting ready to change.
Right, the time piece. How much
Right.
is your time worth, right?
But the way we look at it, the time is now.
Yeah.
Now that we have available capability out there in the cloud, and it's expanding every day, why aren't we doing more to get there? How can we get there faster, but to do it more efficiently? So that's really what we're driving for.
Vicki.
My cost savings are a little bit different. I have an agency with 9 different modes of transportation that have grown up independently. I have 23 help desks. Okay, so I have a huge, the fund that you reference is a really good idea. I don't need it. I really don't. I've got a lot of cost savings out there between putting vendors in a competitive situation and consolidating and leveraging across the department and reducing the federation.
Absolutely.
Go, Gene.
Along with the Modernization Government Technology Act, now putting funding out there, I think more agencies can mature and actually get on board with what the Department of Transportation and FBI is trying to do. I think sometimes it's hard to figure out where to start. Yeah. And the actual paper that was written around IT transformation for this administration is pretty exceptional and really gives a roadmap to a lot of people to fundamentally know the building blocks for IT transformation, and includes everything we've been talking about today.
Absolutely.
Joy.
Yeah, so you'd mentioned different cost savings methods. Scott mentioned different cost savings methods, and Gene mentioned different funding, and there's something to consider. It's very tough to measure cost savings with cloud because you're looking at so many different aspects. You're looking at the desktop, you're looking at the servers, you're looking at the switches, you're looking at power, you're looking at air conditioning. There's a lot of stuff to try to measure around the cost savings, but there's also different ways to look at the funding. So as Gene mentioned, different funding avenues, there's a lot of green initiative fund available for this type of solution. So different ways to get that funding also.
And I think that's a great point, that you have heard stories where agencies and CIOs have kind of collected the end of the year funding and realized, wow, I have a pretty big amount here that I could use, and as long as you can get the CFO and others on board. But that's another discussion too. We don't want to go down that path. We're almost out of time. This has been a great conversation. You guys have made this so easy. Let's always like to look to the future, the takeaways from the conversation. Troy, I'll start with you as well, since we started on this side of the table with Scott last time. Where are we heading when you have conversations with your customers in a year from now or more? What's the conversation going to be like?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, it's an all new exciting world. It's great. I think that we're getting away from the traditional desktop. Laptops are still relevant, but I think you'll see a lot more focus on the tablets, iPads, the smartphones, and those actually becoming a full-blown work device. You know, back in the day it was the Palm Pilot, right? And everybody had those little plug-ins to have a keyboard for their Palm Pilot, and I really see that as the next step for the smartphones.
Enabled by cloud, think client, et cetera.
Absolutely.
Right.
There's a lot of horsepower behind a smartphone now that can house all the applications and whatnot.
And Vicki, you talked about a future of DevOps. You talked about a future of really getting applications ready. When we talk again in a shorter amount of time, I'm sure, what's the transportation department going to look like as well?
So I'm really looking forward to reducing those monolithic applications, moving them into cloud environments in a very web services way. So it's a big focus. We have a lot of duplicative spend that we can leverage to make that happen. And I want to start investing more in the plethora of data that we have in the department. We don't do enough with that incredible data. We don't do enough with AI. We don't do enough with data lakes and software robotics and automation. Those are areas that we need to invest in.
All right. Now, Gene, you had said earlier a big focus on DevOps and the change of culture. I think that's happening across government. I can't talk to a CIO, I can't talk to someone in government without happening. So what's the next step beyond that? Or where are we going next?
I think once the government discovers the success of DevOps for those monolithic applications, and they actually see it transforms how they deliver their service to the citizen and themselves around mission, it'll take off because they'll have past performance to know how to modernize it going forward. And as far as we're concerned, we want to continue to listen to the voice of the customer and to continue to make sure we're providing the right technology to enable their successful missions as well. So I think it's I think it's the beginning, and it's wonderful because cloud's been around for 10 years. And I really think we are at the pinnacle of really transforming it. So it takes a while, but it's a wonderful time to be here to help.
All right, and Scott, you get the last word.
Awesome. So just to capitalize on something you just said, it really is about our end user experience as well. Even though we're feeding internally to our folks, we're wanting to make sure that they have the capabilities they need and want, where they want to use them, how they want to use them, and that we're building robust enough solutions that they can take advantage of it every day.
Excellent. We could talk longer, but unfortunately we are out of time. Let me thank my guests. Scott Bean is the Assistant Director of the IT Infrastructure Division at the FBI. Vicki Hildebrand is the Chief Information Officer at the Transportation Department. Gene Edwards is the Executive Director of Federal Sales for Civilian Strategic Programs at Dell EMC. And Troy Massey is the Director of the Enterprise Engagements for Iron Bow Technologies. Thank you all very much for taking the time today.
Thank you.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the panel discussion, Transforming the Government Workplace Through Cloud, sponsored by Iron Bow Technologies and Dell EMC on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com and search Iron Bow.
On behalf of Iron Bow Technologies and Dell EMC, thank you for joining us. The archive session will be available shortly. If you qualified for continuing education credit, you will also receive an email with your training certificate. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.